All right, welcome back. Just breezing through hour two here on a Liquid Lunch. It is a Woman Wednesday, but even on Woman Wednesday, when we get the great guests who are men, we got to get them in. And yesterday we had John Guandolo on, former FBI agent, decorated military veteran, counterterrorism, intelligence analyst. And we were talking about how this, what I deem terrorist organization, Antifa, has got into this whole Black Lives Matter movement and fomented all kinds of stuff. And John Guandolo actually said that they are operating much like ISIS. And, just to get into all the craziness that's going on out there, someone who's worked for multiple agencies, 30-year government veteran, intelligence analyst, worked for the Joint Special Forces. Brian Boyd joins us right now to talk about a bunch of things. But Brian is a counterterrorism specialist, intelligence analyst, former Green Beret, part of the leadership of the Joint Special Operations overseeing SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, and Special Forces, served in the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and Department of Treasury, worked in the Reagan White House. So I'm just going to let you talk because you've seen it all, my friend. But thanks for joining us today, Brian. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, John. Nice to be on your show.
So, Brian, have you ever seen, and you worked in all levels of government intelligence, have you ever seen the Department of Justice and the intelligence agencies of our country weaponized against a political candidate like what it looks to me as the government under Barack Obama did to Donald Trump? Have you ever seen anything like that bad before?
No, it's quite appalling to me because throughout my career, I was blessed to have been in the foundings of several agencies in the government. The Justice Department, I was with that organization. I went over to the Treasury, then I went down to Bragg. And each of those places I was serving under either commanders or directors of those agencies. And I never saw that kind of behavior. I would have left if I found that to be a case, or I certainly would have said something. When I was in Washington, D.C., I was used to talking to the Washington Post. They were always in my office. But I never had this kind of acrimony, this kind of shenanigans go on in the system. It's appalling to me.
Yeah, so President Richard Nixon was effectively, shuttled out of office because he had some of his, political henchmen wiretap a room in the Watergate Hotel and all this other stuff, right? Didn't Barack Obama wiretapping Donald Trump Tower and all of Trump's associates, didn't he do something much worse in your view?
Yeah, historically in our country, there's always campaigns of digging up dirt. I think what makes this one so unusual, if you go all the way back to the Watergate era, is because of a dossier that was manipulated, and the corruption, and I say this very carefully, and the treasonous behavior was at the upper levels of the FBI. That is shocking to me. I mean, how do I convince my younger kids and other kids out there to want to aspire to a career in agencies like this that are so besmirched with lack of integrity?
No, I understand. It is bizarre. I'm hoping that we get something concrete out of the Durham report. I would love to see James Clapper and Brennan get hauled out in handcuffs, because I feel like, they pulled a cute trick. They knew they couldn't use the FBI for this surveillance, so they used foreign sources to get the CIA to do some of the dirty work, including creating the dossier with Steele, who was known to have worked for the CIA. But let me ask you this, Brian. We get caught up in this crap so hard sometimes. We try to lighten the mood and, maybe just, have a laugh and we get a break from it. You worked in the Reagan White House. I think most people in the modern era would say he was one of their favorite Republican presidents. He may be up there with Trump these days. But can you give us a couple of fun stories about being in the White House with Reagan? Give us like one of your favorites that you can tell without breaking any of your codes.
Well, probably one of the funniest things is, as a young man, after getting my master's degree in forensics, I wanted to become an FBI agent. And the year I applied, I was not a minority. I just happened to be on the wrong side of that equation. But I got an invitation to go over to the White House, and 9 of us sat in a room in the Nixon administration, and we were offered 2 job opportunities. One was to go over and help start a new agency called the DEA, work with a guy named Giuliani. The other one was go over to the White House and plug leaks. Well, me and my 4 friends went to the right to do that, and Gordon Liddy chose to work at the White House. The rest is history. So, yeah, I couldn't see working in politics, but he chose that, and the rest is American history, making a choice.
Wow. So you wound up with Rudy in the Drug Enforcement Agency, and G. Gordon Liddy wound up in handcuffs.
It was a brand new agency at the time, and the DEA was given the intelligence collection authority from the CIA, so it's now a true Interpol type agency. And we went to great lengths to be able to coalesce the issues, because up until then, every other agency was involved in the drug seizures, and it was just a big mess, and nobody was working together, and everybody was trying to make a bust so they get their budget up. So I was able to be part of that group. And from there, I went over to a Treasury agency and started an intelligence unit there. And then from there, I was invited to go down to Fort Bragg and help pull together in 1980 SEAL Team 6 and Delta's Intelligence Analysis Division. We created a joint intelligence analysis division. So that was exciting. It was interesting years. I've been trying to trace down some of my friends, people like General Schultes, who was the original founder, General Carl Steiner, who went on to be the J2, the G2 of the Gulf War, both the wars.
Wow.
And they're up in their 80s, but boy, I tell you, Carl Steiner wrote a good book called Shadow Warriors with Tom Clancy. It's a good book for your people out there to read. Some of my other friends have written books. I'm in a couple of them, but not by name, on purpose. But one of the better ones is The Operators by Michael Hastings. He was the embedded Rolling Stone reporter.
Wow.
And
you're like a one-man PR outfit. You're promoting every book you ever read. But oddly enough, it makes sense. I mean, White House, Department of Defense, Justice, Treasury, all this stuff. I ask you for a funny story, and I guess it's all subjective or it's all relative. Funny to you is choosing the DEA over the White House, which wouldn't strike most of us as funny, but I guess that shows how serious of a guy you are. But how was Ronald Reagan himself, like in social settings? Was he a cool cat?
I was all right. I didn't really have that much opportunity to work with him. The ironic thing is that George Bush, as the vice president, was the one who really got behind creating the Joint Special Operations Command. Charlie Beckwith had been the head of Delta back then, but because of George Bush's unique situation, he'd been the ambassador to Iran, he'd been the director of the CIA, and because of Reagan's interest and Bush as the second in command of the United States, that's what pulled together the right time in history to do that. If you want to fast forward, we can segue to the Bolton book. We can talk about the horrible missteps that are going on with his behavior.
Yeah, my goodness. Let me ask you this, because you worked in justice and you worked everywhere, basically, so you probably know it all. But I have this long-standing contention that the U.S. prosecutors here in the Southern District and in New York, I think they unfairly target Italians like me. I've always thought that if you have a vowel at the end of your name, you're a top candidate for a RICO case in New York. Do you see any anti-Italian bias when you were in there?
No, in fact, the agencies that I worked for, it was prohibited to work any kind of group. We were not allowed to work any Italian group. You had to work the individual. It was actually prohibited to say, oh, I'm going to prohibit Italians or Irish or anything else. So we couldn't go after the IRA, for example, the Irish Republican Army. We had to deal with people as individuals.
Got it.
So it's literally, you can't do that.
Right. You know? But you could go after the construction industry, where a lot of them in New York do have vowels at the end of their name. But I'm joking around with you, Brian. I appreciate it. All this talk of minorities, and I feel like in New York sometimes us Italian Americans get a bum deal, but you're a great guest, and your service to our country in so many different ways is an inspiration, and it's an honor to meet you. And I want to thank you very much for that, and even for joining us today. Thank you, Brian.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic guy, Brian Boyd. This guy's done it all. 30-plus years, intelligence, justice, treasury, special forces, SEAL Team 6, Green Berets. If you want everything in one, that's your guy. And we'll hear more from him, I'm sure. I'm going to try to pull off the Grand Salami and do the last segment poolside, and we'll come back at you in just 5 minutes.